All right, everybody, and welcome back. We are going to begin setting up our letters, or at least the forms to put our letters in 2-point perspective. I have some tools here. Clearly, I'm always going to be using pencil and eraser with this. I hope that's obvious at this point. I'm actually going to do this in pen only so that it is easier for you to see. I have a long straight edge. At this point, I'm going to elect not to really measure anything. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm not worried that much about the technique. And then obviously some sort of 90-degree angle is going to be super helpful. I have a triangle here. You can use a book. It's less easy that way, but it works for our purposes if you have some sort of a book, as long as you have a 90-degree angle and a long straight edge. So with that said, I want to show what I have currently. So currently, if I cover up what's underneath, right, I have a 12 by 18 piece of paper. I have an 11 by 14 rectangle. I have my horizon line going right through the middle of my piece of paper, and I am going to elect to put my vanishing points just on the very edges of that horizon line. I've kind of already planned out where my letters are going to go, my boxes, just to make things a little bit easier for the video part of the demo. Your boxes can go completely above, completely below. That's totally fine. I do not mind that. It's your call based off of the vision that you have for your project. In this one, I'm going to have it straddle the horizon line only because that was the first idea that I had. One of the things that we'll really want to pay attention to here is making sure that our triangle is lined up perfectly with the bottom of the rectangle that I have drawn. This will end up doing a couple of things. First, it will ensure that not only will the front edge of all the boxes that I'll be drawing going to be parallel to each other, they're also going to be perpendicular to this horizon line because, I line the horizon line up with the edge of my rectangle over here, and that way, I'll show you like that, and that way it perfectly lines up. So lining my triangle up with the bottom of my rectangle will give me a shape, will give me a line that I can draw in basically like this. And at this point, I know this is going to extend all the way to my vanishing point here, and here, here, and here. Now, I'm only going to draw it part way so that you can see things come together. It gets a little weird with the ink, so I'm gonna fudge this just a touch. So if I take the top of this and I line it up with my vanishing point over here, what you'll notice is that I get a perfectly straight line. The same thing is happening on the bottom of my piece of paper. So I'll take this and I'll do that. With pencil, initially what I would do is I would draw a line all the way across here, all the way across here, and then do the same thing on this other side over here. So again, while this is a video demo, it is also a video approximation. If you're a little confused, then asking clarifying questions is going to be important. And I'm taking my time with this. Next comes the defining of the far left and the far right hand side of this individual box. Actually, I'm going to pause just a second. Live demo. I'm going to go ahead and continue this line, but with my pencil all the way. It's frankly, it's confusing if I don't do that, and that's how I want you to start. I'll go over some of this with pen as we start going. Actually, I can leave this. You may or not be able to see this very well, but I can erase whatever I don't need later on. Call it as we go. So once I have this top edge over here defined. That is going to be the top of all of my boxes. Then I need to figure out how wide I want this first letter, because the first letter is going to go on the face of this. All right, so I will bring my triangle over, and I get to decide how wide I want this letter to be. Everybody will have different considerations. Again, making sure that this is lined up right along the bottom of the rectangle that I drew earlier, so that I can ensure 100% accuracy with this line being parallel to this line and perpendicular to the horizon line. I will do the same thing for the left side of my box. There we go. Now that's where my first letter is going to go. I'll kind of carve the whole thing out of there. My first letter, an S going on here, and then I'll figure out, how these lines go back towards the vanishing point for different parts of my S as we start to get that in there. Now, I want to leave some space in between each letter. It doesn't have to be a lot, but at least a little bit of space. One of the things that will help accentuate the letters looking like they're going away from me as they recede into space is to make the next letter a little bit less wide than the one that preceded it. So I'll leave a little bit of space. Come through here, lining up here at the bottom so that I have a perfectly right angle. I will draw a line from the top to the bottom of this first line that I drew in here, coming out to my vanishing point. I want to come over less space than I had here. And again, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm just going to come over a little bit. This will help make them feel like they're going back in space even more dramatically, which is going to be cool. And then that will allow me to then define the top and the bottom space. So this is just the face of that box, right? I can go ahead and define the depth here. That's pretty easy. I'll use the same principle as up here. I go from the top left-hand corner out to my vanishing point that is on the left, over here. And then the same thing from the bottom left-hand corner. I will line that up with my vanishing point, and that is the depth. Now, as my first letter gets in here, I will probably see some of the back of this letter at different points, but we deal with that later, right? Now, whatever my space is here, I want a little bit less space here, and whatever my space is here, I want a little bit less space over here. So, with that said, it's basically the same handful of steps over and over and over again, perfectly lined up along the bottom, going from the top to the bottom of that initial mark. I slide this over. Get that going on. Can put this in pen now, so that it is hopefully easier for you to see. Give a little bit less space in between these two letters than we have here. All these parallel lines going. And that is maybe the most, or at least one of the most important aspects here as we're setting this up. I'll leave a little bit less space in between my last two letters than I had here, because we want necessary places to be parallel and perpendicular, and we want everything to look like it's going back in space. So, you might have to give yourself a little bit more practice with using your triangle. I'll set this up back towards the horizon line on the top and the bottom. So these are the faces of all of our letters. And then again, each one of these points needs to head back towards the vanishing point on my left. And here in just a moment, you should see that it will look like we have all kinds of boxes sitting in real space. I actually can fit this here, but you might need a longer straight edge. All right, so I got the bottoms of all of my boxes defined here. Now it's time to do the tops. And these edges will be quote-unquote parallel. They don't quite look like it, but it's because they're at an angle with this vanishing point. But now we should have enough so that everything should look three-dimensional. It should be perfectly using those two vanishing points. So we've got 2-point perspective. And again, also, when I erase my horizon line going right through the middle of this, because this is one of the first lines that I drew on here, it should look like all of my boxes are now opaque. Something like that. And then I can begin sketching my letters in here, whatever style I want those to look like, and then carving them out of the box. The only other thing that I would do at this point is go ahead and find the middle of the face of each of my letters, even before I start drawing them out, just for that last kind of instructional piece, because, it's kind of funky. I'll do that on each one of my boxes. That allows me to find the horizontal and the vertical middle. I'll just do the first two as a demo, right? So the middle of this matches up with my vanishing point out here. That is going to tell me exactly where the horizontal middle is. It's great if you have like a W or an M, or you want to find that crossbar on an H or an A, or where does the top of the B meet the bottom of the B, for example. And then to find the vertical middle so that I can have an H or an I or a T be symmetrical, what I do is line my triangle up again with the very bottom of that rectangle that I drew so that it goes right through the X over here. I'm gonna scooch it over just a hair. Right. And now I have not just a cross X to find the middle, I have the horizontal middle of this box, and I have the vertical middle of, well, the face of this box. And that'll help there. If for some reason I needed to find this back half, right, which you may or may not need to do, it is highly dependent, then I would just connect wherever this line meets this vertical edge right here and draw it back towards this vanishing point. I could find the middle of this as well, but for this exercise, we don't need to do that because the face of our letters will be here. At this point, once I get these marks drawn on each box, then I'm ready to begin constructing my letters, making sure that they're proportional and they're touching the sides where they need to, and everything lines up as it should. If you have questions, maybe you need to erase and just redo. If something doesn't look quite right, it probably isn't. And so just ask. And of course, as always, make sure to have fun.